Okay, I'll call us to order since we're all in our places. Welcome, everybody, to the December board meeting. It feels early, doesn't it? I mean, like early in the month? Yeah, I guess it is the second Wednesday, but.
And can we just ask Sarah or Wiley, can you chat us and let us know if we can hear, if you can hear us? Well, I guess that's a better way to do it if we can hear.
Yeah.
Wiley said we could-
Wiley can hear us.
Okay, all right, we're good. Yeah. That's you could do a triple negative there. Okay, first order of business is the minutes. So people had a chance to review them.
Yeah, not so much anything to do with the minutes per se, but two questions or comments. One, the checkouts for the Wi-Fi hotspots were supposed to have begun. How is that going? I saw it on the website.
Oh, that's a good question. And why don't we hold off until Larry Newton and we'll give you an update.
Okay.
And
And then the other thing is novel idea reveal was wonderful.
All right. And hold off and I'll talk about that. Yeah, no, it's a lot of good news this month. So, any corrections or additions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the board meeting November 10th.
And I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, and then we have our minutes from the work session. Any additions, corrections? I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we accept the minutes from the board work session in November.
Wait a second. Second. All those in favor? Aye. And thanks for including that presentation from Chris Van Dyke and from
Yes.
Catherine.
Yeah, it was really good.
I like getting those because they go by so fast when they're presenting, and it's nice to have them.
I appreciate it.
Okay, we've got the first quarter financial. Oh, I'm sorry. I went right by. Okay. Any members of the public or anyone who would like to make a comment to the board? Okay.
let's see, I do not have anybody chiming in. No.
Okay. All right.
Sorry if I seem distracted. I'm DJing and controlling the web at the same time.
Exactly. This is like,
Yeah.
I'm trying not to get distracted because it's pretty fascinating. Okay, now, first quarter financial.
Okay, and this is really exciting. This is Robert's first chance to do financials with you,
I
so.
bet he's really excited.
Yeah,
We're
I
excited.
promise to try and make it a little bit clearer than last month's presentation of the supplemental budget.
Well, that was diving into the deep end,
Yes,
right?
yeah, this one should be, familiar format for most of you, and I can walk you through the details. So I'll just start off by saying good afternoon, and as Todd mentioned, I'm very pleased to be presenting the first quarter financial statement. So the report that was included in your packet is for the quarter ending September 30th. All information is current in this report up to that date. It's been reviewed by our accountant at Marina and Company. And the general format of this report hasn't changed much over the past few years, but to kind of walk through the format for if this is the first time looking at it. The first portion of the report essentially states our cash position. There are some modified accrual numbers in there as well, but it's just a general sense of the overall state of cash holdings for the ability to make purchases and expenditures easily. It is broken out by fund as well, so you kind of see where that cash is divvied up. The remaining sheets of the report are essentially a drill down of revenues and expenditures by fund. And then we include a set of highlights for those sets of reports, just to bring up a few of the things that might catch your eye with a bit of explanation as to why something might be a little bit of an outlier appearing, and why we believe that's not a cause for concern, or why we think that's an expected amount. So we can just jump into the report. The first sheet is that cash reconciliation report. It has descriptions for each line item. So if you look in that legend, each of those letters corresponds to one of the line items in the cash reconciliation report. The main things I wanted to bring up here are that bottom line. So our modified accrual fund balance is $232,378,913, which is probably a bit larger than the board is used to seeing in the cash reconciliation report. And obviously that is due in large part to the bond issue. And you can see that in the bond, or in the fund breakout, the vast majority of that cash position exists in the capital projects fund. If you look just at the general fund, we have, as of September 30th, 8.8 million in cash on that fund for general operating expenses. So turning to each of the fund reports, just to highlight a few things for you there. If we look at the general fund report, you'll notice that the bulk of our resources aren't showing up in this first quarter. There's two main reasons for that. The first one is that the large tax assessment shows up in November and in May, June. So it really, you don't see that as a revenue until the Q2 report. I did a little bit of back of the envelope, and after the November tax assessment, we're something on the order of 85% funded for the year with the tax revenue from the assessment. The other element in revenue for general fund that you're not seeing in this report, that you will see in Q2, is the revenue that we get from our contracts and agreements. We have a library agreement between our district and Jefferson County and Crook counties. Those were paid in early October, so they just missed the cutoff for Q1. And then the law library, same token, the county pays us a certain fee for hosting the law library, maintaining that here. That did not show up in Q1, it showed up right at the beginning of Q2, so we'll show up in the Q2 report in the revenue.
So any change in the agreements with Jefferson and Crook?
There was an adjustment for a small amount of escalation in terms of inflation, but dollar amount, it was very similar to what we had last year.
So everybody don't seem to have been affected anyway by the pandemic recession.
It did not appear so. No. Okay, so since we're reporting just on the first quarter, I've highlighted expenditures that aren't tracking exactly to that 25% of dollars spent. In general, these are expected, but it's good to highlight it and ask ourselves, well, why isn't that roughly a quarter of what we had budgeted? So on the one hand, we have a couple of items where large annual costs for like an annual subscription or annual fee was incurred right at the beginning of the year. So you'll see that for auditing. Obviously, the auditing takes place in that first quarter of the year. And then postage and freight, we actually pay an annual lease of the postage machine, and we periodically also make a cash transfer to a bank that machine draws from. And so both of those show up as large Q1 expenditures, but we wouldn't expect that to track proportionally over time because those are one time. Then on the other side of that equation, we're looking at a few expenditures where we didn't exactly use up a quarter of the budget allocated, and those are due mainly to annual expenses that we have not yet reached that annual renewal. So areas like software license fees, those occur throughout the year, but we didn't have a lot in the first quarter. Membership renewals, even printing fees and other elements that would have these kinds of recurring expenses, not exactly showing up in that first quarter, but we'll start to see them come in.
You can probably take election costs out of there.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that in this one because as a Q1 expense, that might be one that you'd be familiar with seeing in any given year, but in this year, obviously, with no election or no election costs. Let's see, and then as far as capital and contingency, so just as a reminder, this is just the capital expenditures that were budgeted as part of the general fund. So not any of the larger projects that were set aside as part of the budget adopted for the reserve fund. And that's why you really only see call outs for some of the projects in my department. Some of the other departments, their projects really aren't staged to use their capital funds for general fund 100 until later. So then I want to turn you over to the reserve and the capital projects. So I want to present those together because they go hand in hand, and without opening up a lot of the details that we got into last month, it is related to that supplemental budget. So when you look at the reserve fund report, you'll notice that resources are much lower than you would expect. And when you look at the capital projects report, it's a bit higher as well. In fact, they're lower and higher by exactly the same amount, by that 1.4 million that we transferred as part of the supplemental budget. So since the supplemental budget passed in November, it'll show up in the Q2 report, and then you'll actually see that rebalancing in the reserve fund after the supplemental budget is factored in. Will be at 90% budget to actual for resources in reserve fund. And that small differential is basically because the balance forward from the previous year was a little bit lower than we had anticipated when we put together the adopted budget. And then in terms of the capital projects fund, we'll bring it down from 101% budget to actual to a little bit closer to 100%. And the reason why that one is such a small percentage wise is obviously the dollar figure as a percentage of the overall amount in that budget. So then we go to the grant funds. The grant funds, majority of fund expenditures in the first quarter were related to the IMLS grant, and 2021 is ready to re-grant. And so we'll see as the year progresses, other grant funds start to use their expenditures. So then that brings me to the fifth and final fund that was in the adopted budget. This one is a really easy read this quarter, and that's because it's the debt service fund. It was the fund set up in the adopted budget for the management of payment of both the interest and the principal on the bond resolution. So when the bond measure passed, the first assessment in property tax did not occur until November. So that's why you don't see any revenues here. They'll occur in Q2, and we'll see after Q2 that our resources are roughly about 90% of what was budgeted. So November really is that big month, and then things kind of tail out throughout the rest of the year to fill in the rest of the tax. And then in terms of expenditures, the only one in Q2 was our first debt payment for interest. And we made that payment on December 1st. So we made our first payment back on the bonds that we took out. So this is the point where I want to offer up to you. If you have any questions now, I'm happy to answer them. If there's anything that goes beyond the scope of this meeting, if you'd like me to do more analysis, I'm happy to do that too and report back to the board on that.
I was just curious about the previously levied taxes, why those are coming in lower than expected, or whether we expect that to pick up or what.
So that particular line, or that particular account in our accounting is really the county, when they make their assessment, they send out those tax bills. Not everybody pays on time. And so really it is the back year collections.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to talk to Todd about how we calculated our estimate.
They come in throughout the year.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so-
this is not,
Every year it looks like this, and then by the end of the year, we're
they've caught
close
up.
to Yes, how we calculated it is, we kind of base it on past history,
Okay,
really.
Yeah.
That's,
yeah, so I mean, it is a certain amount of guesswork because you're essentially predicting how many people who haven't paid their taxes are going to get around to paying. And when you see the tax turnover reports, they go out 15 years. We get $5.04 from 2005.
Yeah.
It's that kind of a thing. So it is a little bit of just, putting your finger in the wind and hoping that you can figure it out.
right now, people have been paying, 96% of the people have been paying their taxes, which is really high. So,
Yeah.
that factors into not expecting huge windfalls going forward.
Right, I knew this had gone down because more people were paying, but
Mhm.
yeah, okay, thank you.
And I'm a little confused on this 1.4 million transfer. I know that was to repay for the land and figure out your finances there. But has that been transferred or is that projected?
It was transferred as of November 8th, I believe was the last board meeting was on or maybe it was the 9th, right? Whatever the date of the last board meeting was, as soon as I received the adopted supplemental budget, I performed the transfer. It was a bookkeeping transfer, so it was just marked to that date of approval.
Okay.
So how will you see it in this report, I think is really the question that gets to the heart of that. And that is when we put together the budget for the reserve fund, that budgeted amount was at 3.6 million because we had already thought that we had done the transfer. And in fact, we had, but after the audit found that we did not have the proper appropriation to authorize it, we had to undo that in the books. That showed up in the carry forward, but the budget still remained at what we thought we had baked the transfer in. That's why when you look at that budgeted count column versus the beginning period balance on the reserve fund, the beginning period balance is off by 1.4 million. So what you'll see in the Q2 report is that beginning period balance, that amount will come back up, and it will be much closer to the budgeted amount.
Okay, good. Thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
Okay, do we have to approve these? I assume.
Yes.
Yes, okay, well, are there any further questions?
Yeah, the non-employee labor,
Yes.
that's mostly snow removal, things like that.
So the non-employee labor is not the people or the vendors that we contract with. It is truly small contract services rather than vendors. So a lot of it is handyman services. We have that baked into non-employee labor. There are a couple other areas in other departments where they just wanted anticipated a certain amount of people who are not employed staff that we would. It's basically 1099 employees that we would bring in to do a particular not defined task as an outside contractor.
So our snow removal is by contract.
Yeah, snow removal is
According to-
through a handful of contracts depending on what part of the county you're in.
Okay.
So like Sisters, we work with Tewalt and Sons.
Oh.
And so they're on contract as a vendor for snow removal up at Sisters. Whenever we hit a certain snow level, they come on out and do it, and then they send us a bill for services.
A big reason it's low is we hired a second facilities person. And before we would cover extra tasks by hiring a handyman or basically a temp to come in and do it. Now we have people on staff.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the financial report quarter ending September 30th, 2021.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, we're to the bond update with Greg. Take it away.
All right, well, good to see all of you again in person, right? Okay, so, one of the very first components of my report is the general, and it talks about communications and team building and some of those. And, this past month in November, we engaged our CMGCs and those teams, and we've been working a lot on the budget. I wanted to let you know that it's really been a very positive experience in my mind of how that's going, to watch the team really engage together, working well together, and good communication and collaboration on, our first big task with them is with this cost estimate. So something I saw as very positive. We've got a good meeting schedule going, and much like this, we're going to move back to a combination of in-person and video conference meetings as we move forward. So, which I think is always real positive to have that interaction as we move deeper into the design process, really be able to get together, look at designs as they progress and talk about them as a team is going to be very positive. But that was just an observation on my part that I thought, as you try to make sure you're creating a good team partnering atmosphere, I feel like we're really accomplishing that, and that we're really off on a run because the project is taken off. It is full speed, and there is a lot happening. As the VPL staff will tell you, we consume a lot of their time.
So the architects have a rep down here for these meetings, or are they counting on steel?
They come down. When we stopped the in-person meetings, Miller Holt stayed in Seattle at their office, and we were doing everything virtual. As we move back to in-person, they will be down basically every other week. We have, the way we have it coordinated is that 1 week we're going through really kind of discussion and administrative functions and talking about things. And then the opposite week, we're doing design reviews where we're looking at plans and details and talking about that. Those design reviews are going to be in person down here. And that way, Miller Hall will be here. Steel will attend. And even on our off weeks when Miller Hall isn't here, Steel will be joining us because we'll get back to where in our local group here is together every week, even though the others are video conferencing in, and Steel is traditional. Kirby, Nagelhout, they'll be coming in and joining us. So, a large part of the group will be together every week. That's just, that really builds that social aspect of building a team and working together.
Who from the library group is on the?
So Todd and Lynn, Chantal, and Robert are always there. And then to the extent that one of the other managers may be needed for discussion, that would occur. We'd look at, hey, do we need Mark OBN because we're going to talk about IT, or Holly because of an operation or something like that. Separate from that, we do have regular sessions with the management team where Miller Holt meets with them plus the rest of the call it senior managers, keep them up to speed as what's going on, get their feedback on design and operationally how it's going to function, and get that input. And then we have regular meetings scheduled to meet with the full staff, and then there's a staff meeting to present the design as it progresses, get their input, much like you guys did with like with Mirrorboard or any of those tools that we use to allow people to present ideas and questions. The whole staff has that same opportunity.
How often do you meet with staff?
It's really as the design progresses. We did it with the conceptual design, and we're planning another one here at the end of schematic design to where they see the for the whole staff. Management is probably at I think we've been doing it almost once a month. Yeah, once a month with the management team. Uh-huh.
Greg, whenever construction begins, is it you or your company that does the day-to-day looking over what's being done, or is that a different company?
So we do that. Part of the architect's role is also to do that on a regular basis. And so we'll have weekly team meetings out on job site, walking the site, looking at, the work being executed, as well as meeting on all of our, activity and tasks. We look at schedule, et cetera. So the architect, and in this case, Steel Architects has taken the lead on all of our construction administration, which is that period during when the work is being performed. Derek Olson is the lead architect on that. Not to say that Miller Hall won't be down here, but because he's local, he's always available and will be active in looking at that and taking the lead for us. And they really need to look at quality of workmanship. Is it being built per plan? They're always going to be working with the CMGCs about questions and that about the plans. But our team, so I hope you guys met James Spence and Benjamin. We have 2 other project managers besides myself that work on the project. They will be actively involved in oversight of the project and engagement with CMGC and everybody else out on the job site. And as we move into that construction, you'll actually see our report change, because we'll start putting and posting photos and attaching them to it and giving a construction update. We talk about where's entitlements design. We'll start a whole construction update. What's the activity? How's that going? And so we'll talk about schedule, budget, and work progress. Speaking of schedule, master development schedule is progressing well, maintaining that schedule. The last one published was back in November. No significant changes to mention there. I did add in a table with the construction start dates, completion dates, and the opening date. And between the end of construction and opening is where we're installing all of the FF&E, furniture, fixtures, equipment, and then loading in collection and getting, operations moved back in, getting them trained, set up, ready to open the facility to the public. So you'll see a little bit of overlap between opening and construction start on some of the branches. And that just has to do with, we've got planned time periods where we actually shut down each branch. And so as we're opening one, we're starting to shut down the other ones, which is starting to move them out of their permanent facility that's going to be renovated into a temporary facility. And so that's why there's a little bit of an overlap. And these will adjust as we go through. Our CMGCs will start to develop detailed construction schedules over the coming year. And so as we do that, would see that these dates will fluctuate a little bit, and we'll update this monthly if there's any changes there. That's a quick snapshot of when we're going to be building stuff. So, the first things that pop up is Central next October, and that will be with the land improvements. So clearing the site and then grading the site. A lot to do with rock remediation that's in there. That takes some time to get that broken up, blasted out, and put into a position that we can then go build the site and commence our street improvements as well at that time. So,
When will the Roball roundabout be done? This is October 2022.
it finishes, and that's under ODOT's date, but we do have that in our master schedule, and it completes the end of 23.
Oh, okay.
So that
it'll
right now we're actually starting slightly ahead of ODOT when we commence in October. They're going to commence their work, somewhat similar, but in the spring. But their intent is to have it completed by the end of 23. So literally a good 8 to 9 months, or actually 10 months in advance of us opening the facility. So there's a good separation between their work and us opening to the public on Central. Project budget, you know, we talked a little bit last month that the month of November and here throughout December is a huge budgeting exercise for us. So Kirby Nagelhout and then JLD, our cost estimator, both engaged in November in preparing cost estimates for our conceptual designs that Miller Hole produced. So those cost estimates were produced over Central and Redmond by both of those groups. And then JLD produced cost estimates for all of the branches, downtown Bend, and then Sisters of the Pine Sun River and East Bend. Kirby's not involved with those. They were just awarded for 2 projects. So we got initial estimates in. The team, you know, really came together well in evaluating those estimates, talking about them. It's really important to make sure that they understood the scope of work. As you saw in those conceptual drawings, they're very high level, the dream state, right? And versus technical drawings. And so I think the estimators did a really good job of understanding those documents, and they did a good job of figuring out, hey, what's in there, what's not, how is that adjusting? And the team really went through that. And so we're now in the process of receiving back updated budgets based on our reviews right now for us to use in updating the bond program. And so we're looking at all of that. Miller Hall and the DPL team has done a ton of work on our FF&E package, the furniture, fixture, and equipment, all of the IT and computer components, the shelving, all of those. And same as we're looking at construction, we're looking at that because that's a multi-million-dollar component of the bond program. And so it's a lot of money in there. And so we're looking at what the designs are, what the scope of work is in there, and what's that budget from a cost standpoint for all of those. So those are all being incorporated into this budget update.
Is there a second opinion on those also?
There isn't. We don't have a separate one from our cost estimator on those as we go through it. So we look at it of the cost that history that Miller Hall has, our knowledge and experience with it, as well as DPL's knowledge and experience of past elements there. All of the IT components, all the computer systems and things that aren't physically attached to the building is really the IT. So Mark Hobie and his department along with him, and going through and figuring out, hey, what do we need? And they're putting together that budget. So we have more control of that. Same with the FE Tech is our consultant for the AMH, so the automated material handling system. And that one, you may remember, was previously put out in an RFP and contracted with FE Tech to supply everything. And so we've gone through the design, the layout of what the system is going to look like, its size, its capacity, its components for all of Central and Redmond, and also what's anticipated to happen in each of the individual branches, because they get small components, different components in those. But all of that has then been looked back at what was the competitive pricing previously quoted and where do we stand and what, you know, there's always some minor adjustments in the actual fit out and layout of the system, but it's been fairly consistent. So we have a detailed cost estimate itemized on that we've used to assemble that. In the future, the plan would be to engage a purchasing agent to work with us on FF&E. And so while Miller Hull is designing it and budgeting it and speccing out those components, our purchasing agent is literally their specialty is the to go out, get final proposals, write purchase orders for all the components of the FF&E package. They also track it and manage how it gets through the submittal process, because you still have a submittal process of picking colors, fabrics, making sure model numbers are all right, getting it into the plants and manufacturing, get them fabricated and built, and then shipping in. That's a component that will have warehousing, where we'll warehouse a lot of that material, because it all comes in over a course of months, but it gets installed in a matter of days or weeks, right at the end of the project. So you've got to have it all sitting there ready to like, bring it out, guys. So we'll go through that, and they manage that process. That's their expertise. So they'll bring another, level of cost management with us in actually getting the purchasing and looking at their experience and knowledge of what we should be paying for those elements at that time. So I would see them coming on board here in the spring sometime.
This spring.
Yeah. They'll come on board and get involved fairly early to start in our next level of budgeting as we go through the design process. One of their roles will be to look at those budgets and advise us of what are they seeing in real life pricing? What are they, because they're purchasing every day. So they will act almost like that cost estimator function on the construction side. We'll have them on the FF&E side.
That's how good their crystal ball is.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know a lot of the architectural firms have their own in-house FF&E.
Yes, and this is being done by Miller Hall in-house. Steel Architects is involved, but Miller Hall has their own internal. So when we went out for the RFQ, RFP with the architects, one of the things that we asked them was, who is doing their interiors? Some of the firms brought in a separate interior design firm. About half of them said, we're doing that internally. And that's what Miller Hall has done. And they have separate staff. You know, Ruth is our overall designer of the project. It's who you see and talk to all the time. But she has other architects that work with her behind the scenes, some that are focused on building design, some that all they do is focus on interiors and finishes and furniture and that element. So they're, and we do engage with them.
Our team is engaging with the Mill Hall FF&E. Okay, so you're not all by yourself trying to figure
Oh,
out.
heavens, no.
That's what I was getting from yours, saying,
No.
we don't want.
Right. But
Mark may
you know,
want to do it by himself.
but I think going back to, you know, the discussion about.
You will want to do it.
As our team is really working well together. I say that about our collective DPL team, you know, owners always have a big role in a project. They don't get to just sit back and wave their hands. They've got to engage, and these guys have engaged really well in communicating what we want, what we need, how it's going to operate, our experience on products that are good or bad, and communicating that to the Miller Hall team. And I think Miller Hall is doing a good job of feeding that back to them to say, tell us more about this. We had a great discussion yesterday about, it started off of the early learning center, and then went a little bit broader about how we really set up those elements that go in those spaces that kids of all ages are going to engage with and utilize. And, you know, I think that was a really good collaboration. We realized we need to have a whole visioning meeting between DPL and where we can really drive what we want, but let Miller Hall be that creative force to execute it and design it and spec it out. So budget, like I said, is going along well. We're looking at all aspects of it. We'll have it finished by the end of December and ready to present to you in January. I don't see anything that's shocking right now or scaring me, you know, as far as, hey, we're busting the bank on anything. Things are generally coming in within big buckets that we have. we're gonna do some moving of money. You know, we have the reserves there that we haven't allocated out. And we'll show you where we'd like to allocate those out based on this cost estimating. I'll tell you that we will be pushing more money into the 4 branches. Sisters, Lapine, Sun River, and East Bend. Just because I think the work that needs to happen in those is probably greater than originally anticipated. And they need those improvements that were defined through the concept. And we want to make sure we're allocating substantial funds into those. So you'll see that. We'll talk about each of those buildings. Fairly consistent across the board between them. Sun River's higher because there's a element of the exterior building, you know, the entrance and fixing the entrance so that it deals with the snow accumulation and allows people to circulate and use that space right there. Warhol came up with a really good solution for that. So that has a little bit higher cost. Otherwise, the other 3 are very consistent across the board, FF&E as well as construction.
Frank, just as a clarification for me, I can't remember, but you were talking about the conveyor belt system that goes, I know in Central Library.
Mhm.
Is there one in other libraries that's a smaller conveyor belt system? No, just the one in Central.
There is. Redmond has it's substantially smaller, but it's same type of function on a lower volume basis, handling the material and processing it. So as we go through, you know, kind of leads into a little bit of discussion about design. You know, we're right in the middle of schematic design. We will get our first pass at schematic documents right before Christmas. It's a progress set for our cost estimators and Kirby to start looking at, and us to start looking at. We get the schematic design in mid-January. We'll be setting up a time to let Miller Holt present that to you, and you'll really see in that design where it's going in the building, its volume and size, the shape. They've actually drawn the machines already in there so that you can see them and see the conveyor system where it exists and how it will actually at Central, it's going to be visible to the public so they can see the activity, the excitement about that, and but also then where how people interact with the delivery and pick up books and those kinds of things will start to show up. Not finalized, but our next level of design.
And that is the meeting we're attending the schedule with you. We saw the note for the 25th, doesn't look like that's gonna work, but so we'll be checking back in for dates that work for everyone.
So it's just 2 of the libraries, a bigger conveyor belt and a little one in Redmond.
And
Each of them get little components.
yeah,
Downtown Bend will have something probably more similar to Redmond, very similar,
So there will be.
because of both of their volume and size. And the other branches have a much smaller component.
They'll be more of a, it's called a smart bin. They won't have the conveyor system, but they will have a smart bin that will be an automatic check-in when things get dropped off.
Oh,
Because
so
we
it'll
just
be,
don't do the volume at
Oh.
Sisters Lopine and East Bend when I'm in space.
so it's kind of an update for each one. too.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's kind of like what we wanted to do 2 years ago when we first started this, but because there were design issues in the building, these are gonna now be fixed in our smaller branches so that we can utilize the technology.
Oh, great.
You know, along the lines of the budget costs, as we're starting to see our cost expenditures grow every month, which is expected, you know, as we developed the cash flow early on, when we were evaluating with the bond council, they wanted the cash flow and we developed it. And that's tracking to those metrics, you know, of how that's going to grow. And that's going to continue each month, getting more and more. We're going to continue to spend money as we're pushing through the design process and on into the construction process. So it runs at a fairly steady pace, not a huge up spike for most of the next year. 2023, we'll see a huge jump because of construction. That's when we're gonna spend the bulk of our dollars. And you'll really see it jump up there. So, you know, as we continue through this process and we're turning in draws and looking at that, questions that may come up, all of a sudden we're seeing big $1 million checks going out the door. Always know that we talk about this regularly, me and Todd and Robert, everybody. But any questions you guys have, please. I don't always put all that detail in, but it's always available.
What do you think it's running monthly then?
Right now, I think we're probably, if we're hitting $1 million a month, that's probably.
Oh, I'd say about half that, actually,
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of the draws, yeah.
$500,000?
Yeah, about $500,000, the
Yeah.
majority of that right now is Miller Holsby.
Yeah.
One thing that you will see when you do warrant signatures is that we've started including an additional warrant approval letter for ACH transfers, because a lot of these larger invoices, it's just both safer and frankly quicker to pay the vendor via ACH electronic transfer.
Just tell us what you see.
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I don't know what ACH stands for. But it's the, it's the protocol that banks use in order to do an electronic transfer. It's similar to a wire, but the technical details are different enough that they actually categorize it and charge you different. So, what that's worth. You saw, what's that?
It's where no real money moves.
Yeah. Yeah. So you saw that, you saw this last week, potentially, a $3.6 million electronic transfer. That was the interest payment. So that those movements of large dollar values are just, we're not going to be writing physical checks for those. And so they'll show up on a separate approval letter from what you do for our check.
I signed last week and I did ask.
The eyebrows.
What is
Right.
this?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's great to break it out. Very helpful.
Based on your getting your board packets, we're not sending the check in the mail.
Yes.
Moving further through procurement and contracts, you know, we got all the contracts on the previous approvals completed. Work package 4 for the CMGC selection, which is for the 4 branches. We did receive proposals in on that on the 30th. We're going through our evaluation process right now. And we'll be presenting to the board in January the results of that evaluation and our recommendation on that. Same information, same format that you've seen in the past. Additionally, our commissioning agent is same thing. We received proposals last week from them, going through the evaluation process with them, and you'll see that in January. So that process of procurement will continue. It's going to slow down now. We've got the bulk of the early ones done. Our last CMGC, which will be for downtown Bend, is a year out because it happens at the end of the bond program sequence. But we'll have a few more, like the purchasing agent, that'll happen in the first quarter, maybe second quarter of this next year.
So when you present the finalists for the smaller libraries, you bring us the top 2 or 3 with your reasons for choosing.
Yeah, it'll be presented in the exact same format on that. Who was, you know, who presented, submitted proposals, our evaluation of them, and who's the top ranked finalists that we, you know, would propose moving forward with.
And so we can get that, you know, board packet at least
Yes.
a week before, so we have a chance to look through it.
Yes.
Make sense of it, right?
Yeah, we'll have everything completed in the review process that the team goes through here in December, so that I think it's January 4th. All the summaries, you know, I usually do a summary of the evaluation process and the results with the scoring sheets and all that. That'll all be packaged in your board pack for both the CMGC work package 4 and the commission.
And just so you'll know, the re-roofing of Sisters has begun. I was in there the other day and it's very loud.
Yes, they commenced work on Monday. Yeah, it was Monday, and we had a pre-job on last Friday, and if all goes well, they'll be out of there in about 2 to 3 weeks. And
Weather
wrap it
permitting.
up. Yes. So I think, that was after we went through the board review last month, we went back with the architect and finalized the selection of specific materials and some warranties, and looked at a couple of alternates that we had identified in there to really look at what's the best product for DPL. And I think we ended up with a really good roofing package. So we'll have a new roof here in a couple weeks.
Before the snow flies.
Yes.
Did they look at all about that metal?
Yeah, they deal with all the roof metals, the roof shingles, and
I mean, instead of shingles themselves, they actually installed metal roofing material.
now that was looked at previously, but was determined to stay with the same shingle design that was there, just a replacement of it. We looked at the options on shingles and went with really a fairly, I want to say like high caliber, but just a high quality product of how that was done and how the venting is done with the roof system to really make sure that the venting, because I think that may have been part of the issue on the old one, is the older design of the shingle system, just the way they were made and how the roof was vented to allow air to flow out from underneath the attic. With the new systems that were available to us that really improved performance, will improve performance.
They're gonna do the venting along the,
Now, it's built with, like in the ridge
right,
of it is where it's at. So it's not really changing anything in the eaves, but up in the ridge of the
Right.
roof
it's
system.
vented at the ridge line.
There's a
Are they
bit-
having eave venting also at the same time?
Uh,
Or
the-
air-
Only what's existing. We're not changing any of that. But all of the other sheet metal flashings, which are really important from a water intrusion standpoint, was dealt with and looked at there.
So on the venting, the eave vent, those soffits, or are they actually onto the eaves?
What I recall, it's all E venting, but Ray, I'm guessing a little bit there, because it's been a while since I looked at that.
They're gonna go with at least 8-inch wire screening on that, or they can.
That's all existing, so that's not changing.
Oh,
Yeah. So whatever's there currently is remaining. We're just dealing with the roofing. But within the roofing system, there's a venting of the roofing system. And so that's what, as we looked at what spec, what model of shingle system we were using, we went with that vented system. Insurance, we are out right now getting quotes on the DSIP, which is general liability policy for the bond program that we'll put all of our contractors into, and so that's out being priced. If, depending on the responses as they come back this month, we may be in a position to present it to you in January, otherwise it'll push to the February meeting. But, our goal is to have it ready to present to you in January. On the entitlements, the activity, so on Central Library, our text amendment is in. We do have a public hearing this month. And that's for everybody who lives within a certain radius. It's a required hearing that we have to conduct. Those announcements went out earlier this week, and we're going to meet, I think it's the 21st. And that'll be a Zoom meeting to allow, anybody who would like to attend that.
so
But
that'll be on December 21st?
yes. And so that's just a process that, we've had our own outreach meetings, but this is a formal public hearing that we have to be in compliance with the requirements of our application. And so this will occur at that time. And so we've had mailers, I think they had to go out any, property owner within 500 feet of our property, we had to give them a written notice of the hearings. That's happening.
Can you send the Zoom link to us?
Yeah. The property line adjustment, we had signed that off last time, and that's all been submitted. It's in with the city now, being processed. So nothing new from what we talked about last. It's just in process. And we'll go on for another month or so before that's completed. The ODOT agreement was wrapped up and finalized, as we talked about last month, and that was done. We have a couple deliverables that we owe to ODOT coming up here in January. One is our traffic report. So our initial, which is TFR, is just a nomenclature, but it's for the traffic report, was prepared by our engineer and submitted to both the city and to ODOT this month. And right now they're working on finalizing traffic mitigation measures that go with that traffic report. And we owe those to ODOT in January and to the city at the same time. So those are underway and being processed. That's moving along well. We did a traffic study at a similar library, it's the library in Vancouver, Washington, size and capacity, to evaluate what the traffic rates are, the volumes of traffic, in order to submit that with our traffic report to the city on what we would anticipate to incur at the new library and traffic volumes. And so it's a real study versus going off of a book, which they don't, in manuals, they don't really have good statistics for libraries. And so we were able to locate this library being very consistent with the size and capacity and type of facility that we have. So I think that's going to give us really good information, or it did give us good information on the volume, so that it's a more accurate report. And that impacts our fees with the city and impacts our fees and mitigation measures with ODOT. So our traffic engineer did a good job on collecting the data and interpreting the data and putting that into his report. And he feels very confident in the results of that and being able, and he engages regularly with both the city, all of the local cities, and ODOT on a regular basis.
So who did the report for us?
Joe Bessman is his name.
How do you spell that? Bessman?
It's Bessman. I think it's like Bessman and Associates is probably his company name. Actually, I think that's wrong.
Transite?
Transite. Transite is his company name. But there's two traffic engineers that are active here in Central Oregon. He's one of them. But he has a really good track record, and he's been involved with the project from day one through the due diligence on the central property and all of the evaluations, as well as continuing to do our traffic reports and stuff.
So we get a copy of that?
Sure. Our updated sewer and water assessment was done, and that's a report that we had prepared by the city to verify that we have capacity. They have capacity in the system where we plan to attach. We had one done at the time of due diligence on the purchase of the property to make sure that, yes, there's capacity, and that capacity still remains as it was previously identified and available. So that was just a real good positive report, one we have produced, and but just verification that we don't have any issues there. So that was completed, and their team is continuing to work on preparation of our next entitlement submittal, which is our site plan and the actual annexation application documents. Those will go in next March, the beginning of March. But the progress on them is moving right along. And that kind of moves concurrently with our building design as it's developed. We really fine tune those site elements. With the city of Redmond, we have an existing deed on the land, there that's partially owned by the city and partially owned by DPL. The city land was deeded over to DPL to use. We need to update that deed and to change it because of the reconfiguration of the site. That is going to the city in January, to the city council. Staff has already reviewed our documents and reviewed the existing deed and understand it needs to be updated for it. And so we'll get that in front of the city council and we'll ultimately develop an updated deed for that property. So nothing otherwise on that. We'll be going through a site plan approval for our entitlements on Redmond. Design wise, as I mentioned, our schematic design is under full way on Redmond and Central. We'll present those to you coming up here in January. I think that design has progressed really well in the way it's worked out and laid out. No significant changes from what you guys saw in the conceptual designs, that's continuing to develop along those exact same lines. So you'll see just the progress that's occurred over the past months. With the branches, we started schematic design here just at the beginning of this month on Sisters and Lapine. And so we'll start to see those designs. You'll see those come out probably in late February, maybe early March. They're staggered a little bit behind Central and Redmond, so that way we weren't trying to do them all at one time. But those progress, and then behind that will come Sun River and East Bend. Now, I don't know that there's a lot of information relative to the design, than what it looks like that I can share with you today. Our outreach program was extremely active this past month, going through and meetings with our community groups and seeking their input. And, the DPL set up the on the website, the places for the community to go. And I think we've gotten incredible amounts of feedback on that coming from community members. And that feeds right back to our design team. And so Miller Hall goes through that, they read those comments, they look at them, and they think about how do they address the community's thoughts and concerns and needs, and then how do they share that back with DPL on how it's influencing the design, how they are dealing with that. And so that process, I think, is working well. I think, can get feedback every week. I see a stream of feedback reports going in. And so the outreach program, I think, is really strong. That's moving right along, and will continue as we go forward with each evolution of design that we've been talking about. Okay, what's our next steps? What do we do next spring to, continue our outreach and communication with the community? That's always in process. We talk about it every week. That's one of our main topics on our owners meeting, to really make sure that we're always thinking about how are we communicating to the community.
Can we get a report on the results of those community input?
I don't know that there's a report that we get from it. We get different types of meeting notes and then just the actual feedback.
Can we get the feedback?
I think the Miller Hall is going to summarize them all, but we just closed the public feedback at the end of November, so we should have that.
Actually, yeah, December 2nd, so it's been very short time. So yeah, Miller Hall's going to compile a summary for us. And then we get that up.
How many responses did we get on the web?
About 400.
So I think, I would like to see not just a summary, but if you could actually, I'd be willing to look at the 400 inputs. I think that's critical
What
for
I mean by summary,
understanding what the public wants.
that they're just putting it, they're categorizing that. So they're not shifting anything that's come in, all the language is the same, but they're saying like regarding East Bend, regarding Sun River, listen.
That's fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, then you said you've gone out to, what is it, how many number of community groups? 60 some?
15, yeah.
Oh, 15. So can we get a report or a summary of what was said in those groups?
That would be part of their summary, because they're the ones who probably know. They're at each one of those meetings.
They're the note takers, not us, so that we can make sure that they're really hearing it and asking questions for clarification.
Mhm. So we get the community input from those also, as well as the summary.
Yeah,
When can you get that to us?
well, we'll have to check in with Miller Hall, I think probably in January, or, yeah, probably I'm thinking by the next board meeting for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Christmas is coming up, so it's I assume 2 weeks of nothing.
Right,
Yeah, and they've got some big deliverables on the design side right now, where deadlines that they're super focused on in getting us designs. But I think as we wrap up those deliverables, they're going to be able to assemble all of those.
I'd like to get the comments from the public before they get into the final design deliverable. Before they massage the data, I'd like to see the data itself, what the public is thinking. Because we're not doing physical charrette processes here. In the past, we've done physical charrettes, multiple ones, where the public and the board, I for one, sit in on all of them to hear what the public has to say. Because their input is critical to the design itself. For instance, the downtown library. Original architects came in with a fabulous design of glass and steel and everything. And the public said, stone, trees, the environment, wood, was critical. You were there. That changed their entire design. So I'd like to see what the public is actually saying, not just their summary, because everybody's got a bias.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's a problem for them to assemble that. And we'll talk to them about how quickly they can get that put together.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we're balancing their workload, but it's also, we hired a big professional firm, and so
Yeah, I
put a couple extra people on it. They should be able to deal with that.
I think it's something that is critical for the board to see.
It's really kind of it on my report. I think schedule, budget. Any other questions you guys might have that I didn't touch on?
If I had any further questions.
Well, let me ask you on your schedule. I see here on 2021 December. Now, you've got the red button that says 5% bond proceeds committed. I know that has to be a firm commitment, not actual expenditure. But we've got, that's supposed to be somewhere around 11 million.
Yes.
And right now we've got 4.5.
No, that's 4.5 expenditures. Our commitments are actually probably at about 8% right now, with between Miller Hall's contract, our contract, costs that were incurred. A lot of that 4.5 million, which was, the early land purchase and all of the early design was a big chunk of that. And then the other contracts with, whether it's the geotech cost estimated and the CMGCs, pushed us. When we executed the contract with Miller Hall, we actually at that point pushed over the 5%.
So can you add to your cost summaries here, the actual committed costs?
In the budget report,
Yeah,
yes.
rather than just what's been spent. What have we already committed to?
Yeah, I'll add just a third column in there where it's, total revised budget and then a commitment to date and then spent to date. That information comes right out of our report form, so will not be hard.
Excellent.
questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Greg, again, as always, for a really thorough and informative report. Good. Good to see that things are moving along. Next up, we've got our monitoring report, communication and support to the board. And in contrast to most of the reports, which are Todd giving his evaluation of how we're doing in an area, this is one where the board does direct inspection and is responsible for the evaluation of whether or not the results policy has been met. So I don't know how you want to handle this, whether you want to go down through each item, or you want to just discuss it in general and or call out any areas that you want to discuss. How would you like to proceed? Did people have a chance to look at the packet online before the meeting? Well, maybe we ought to just go through each one, and if anybody has a comment, then we can talk about that item. Again, this is that we're supposed to have looked at past board packets and other forms of communication between Todd and the board to determine if the director has communicated with the board in a manner that is consistent with a reasonable interpretation of the policies outlined in each numbered paragraph. So the overreaching one is the library director will not permit the board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. Accordingly, the library director will not neglect to submit monitoring data required by the board. See policy on monitoring library director performance in a timely, accurate, and understandable fashion, directly addressing the provisions of board policies being monitored. 2, fail to make the board aware of current and anticipated trends, adverse media coverage, and material external and internal changes, particularly changes in the assumptions upon which any board policy has previously been established. 3, fail to inform the board of any serious organizational situations that could result in impairment of the delivery of library services in a negative image by the stakeholders. 4, fail to advise the board if, in the library director's opinion, the board is not in compliance with its own policies of governance process and board library director linkage, particularly in the case of board behavior that is detrimental to the work relationship between the board and the library director. 5, fail to marshal for the board as many staff and external points of view, issues, and options as needed for fully informed board choices. 6, present information in unnecessarily complex or lengthy form or in a form that fails to differentiate among information of 3 types: monitoring, decision preparation, and other. 7, fail to provide a mechanism for official board, officer, or committee communications. 8, fail to deal with the board as a whole except when A, fulfilling individual requests for information, or B, responding to officers or committees duly charged by the board. 9, fail to report in a timely manner on actual or anticipated noncompliance with any policy of the board. 10, fail to supply for the agenda all items delegated to the library director yet required by law or contract to be board approved, along with the monitoring assurance pertaining thereto. 11, fail to release support materials for regularly scheduled board meetings no fewer than 6 days prior to the board meeting. 12, fail to post a notice of board meetings at all branch facilities in a timely manner. And 13, fail to provide access to current district policies. So from my standpoint, I'll start. Because I'm talking. No, I think Todd's done a good job on this, as always. I think he's been responsive to information that we've asked for, has provided it in a timely manner, and this gets back into Margot's philosophy of no surprises. So I don't think there's been anything that's cropped up that he has failed to inform us about. And I appreciate that, because we have to be informed if we're going to be good board members and to be able to respond to questions that we get. I think we've done a good job on current anticipated trends. And there's been a lot of new material over the past year, but I think Todd, through the staff reports, I think all the information that we receive, at least from my standpoint, has been at the appropriate level of detail. And that if I wanted more detail, that detail has been presented and has been available, and it's provided in a timely manner. So those are my comments. I can't see, I believe that we're in compliance.
I agree. We are notified on a regular basis when anything comes up. And I think everything's in compliance.
I agree with that.
So I was just saying the same thing, Lenny, I agree.
Yeah. Right.
Well, it's kind of failing on Todd's part. Number 5. Todd has, at the direction of the board, he has brought external points of view and issues and options to the board. I think it's more, the board has not asked him for more points of view or opposing points of view for him to work on. So it's not a failing on his part. I think it's maybe reflecting on us.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, I don't want to go through this whole 6 years again.
I feel like we've gone through that. I wasn't here 6 years ago, but we've gone through that 6 years of decisions and how. Todd's been very responsive for that. We've gone through it again, so I feel very comfortable with that.
Well, this is not a failing on Todd's part.
Well, I feel like we've asked plenty of questions and have enough information on those decisions that were made 6 years ago and since then. I feel very confident with that.
Yeah, and I feel like at the time, I mean, as evidenced by the fact that we started in on the planning process many years ago and put the brakes on the process and said, hey, wait a minute, we haven't done the due diligence that we need to know as far as facilities planning, what we really need, and let's stop where we are right now, go back and start again. So, I mean, I think that indicates the board's willingness to gather the information that board members felt they needed to make complete, well thought out decisions. And I think we established a good process that the board agreed upon. And we haven't been shy about asking people to come in and get information. Todd's been really good too about providing us with information from all these design institutes that, thanks to COVID, we were able to watch online. So, I mean, I feel, I felt very well informed and very comfortable with each decision that we've made along the way. And I don't think the board has been shy when we've gotten to places where there was more information needed to ask for that information. That's just my opinion.
As a newer board member, and I don't know about Ann, but Lord knows, we went through weeks 3-ring binders that we have with a lot of background information. So I felt like that I was, well, I may not have been here 6 years ago. I felt like that with that education, I understood. I was open, it was free to ask questions and at any point in that time. And so I feel like you did everything you could to bring us all up to date, even the appointments.
Yeah, that's it. This is not a, it's not a failure on Todd's part. I think Todd has met this policy 100%. He's gone back, leaned over backwards to make sure he's fulfilling this policy. He doesn't do anything that the board doesn't direct him to do. He's not going off on a tangent on his own. But I don't think this is the correct venue right now to discuss this, but the thing that's, when Ann said, you know, we discuss this at length, everybody feels fine, then I would just ask, say, Bunny, what were the arguments, pros and cons of building a central library versus community library when it was the board's decision 10 years ago to build an East Bend library and to lease it, you know, to make sure that we did this stop, as Ann said, before we move forward to build a library without full data. We have the full data now. The highest usage per square foot is East Bend, but we didn't go and say why we wouldn't build a larger facility in East Bend. We did say why we wouldn't want to lease more buildings like East Bend. I'm sure you found that in all the volumes and volumes that we had, and you could explain to us why we decided not to build a permanent East Bend library in lieu of or in conjunction with a central library.
Well, I think those discussions were had, and I think the other 4 board members did satisfy the answers to those questions in their mind. So I think we can agree to disagree on this one, but
I can't agree with you either on that, Ray. He sat in this room and spent the majority of the meeting actually looking at the pros and cons of the central library versus the community libraries. We spent a whole meeting discussing that and times prior to that too. So it's, I don't know, for me, I feel like my questions were answered.
But why specifically not East Bend when it was the decision 10 years ago that we would lease a building?
Ray, I think we've gone through this previously, and our focus has got to be on moving forward. So I guess what I would request of all board members is that if you have questions as we go along, if you have additional information that you want, that you speak up and let Todd and your fellow board members know, and we'll do our best to get that information. But we have this this policy before us, this monitoring policy, which we have to make a decision on.
Just to the point, since we do these annually, usually the expectation is you're looking back over the last 12 months, just not the last 10 years. That might help in trying to decide what to do with this policy right now.
No, I think you're in full compliance.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, we do need a motion that we are in compliance.
I make a motion that we are in compliance with communication and support to the board policy.
A second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next up, we have collection development from Emily, which we got lots of promos on this last meeting, so it's like drum rolls. Lots of questions. This is always a good presentation.
Got to get it ready for the people on the other side.
And you're in.
Awesome, thank you. And actually, well, I'll just use the mouse. I don't know what I did with the clicker, but the mouse is fine. Hi, it's always so good to see you guys. I like taking the opportunity to talk about collections. Obviously, it's my favorite part of the library, and it's a good opportunity to be able to share what we've done over the last year. So the first thing I always like to share are just some trends that we're seeing nationally. So how are fellow Americans in the world using books, and what can we expect from users moving forward for our library? So I have 3 different studies that I decided to share this year. The first one comes to you from Statista Advertising and Media Outlook. So they're a company dedicated to really more as far as purchasing behaviors and how people use commercial products. And so this is talking about how did consumers navigate with books last year. And the answer is that on a purchasing level, people are still buying more print books than they're buying ebooks. And it's important to explain that purchasing level, because there is a difference between how people purchase and how people borrow. And a lot of that has to do with what are people going to want to keep in their own libraries, at their homes, on their bookshelves. What books are they going to want to give as gifts? What books are people going to want to borrow to their friends? And so there's a lot of difference between what people borrow and what people purchase. But in a purchasing realm, the print book is still senior to an ebook. And even in a COVID world, which was very fascinating with this study, that even in a world where we're getting a little bit more fearful of tactile things, that the print book still stood on top last year as far as consumer behavior.
Is that the number of books purchased, or is it just the number of times they purchased?
It's the number of books purchased.
So there's twice as many print books purchased as ebooks,
Right now, yeah,
not by cost, just by total number.
total number. Yep.
And what's the trend been on that?
What was that?
What's been the trend?
I don't know. I would have to go back and see if they have a longevity study on that. That was just what I found this year. So it might be worth going back and seeing if they have studies from years before, years after, but that was specific to the 2020. I do know ebook usage generally is going up, but overall, again, the print has stood out as far as commercial purchases. So the next study to look at is going to be the Pew Research. So we love Pew. They often give us really interesting data to share, and this one's really specific to who isn't reading. So you have to kind of read this in reverse. So who hasn't read a book in the last 12 months? So 23% of adults haven't read a book in the last 23 months. So it's kind of like this reversal of thinking. So the overall trends of those who read books versus those who don't. We know this one, women read more books than men. We also know that what's interesting here is that more people between the ages of 18 and 49 read books last year than 50 plus. So that's new for us, is that we have seen more of a reversal of who's reading, and you'll see that actually in the next study that I'll share as well. And then
This is 2021 data?
this is 2021 data, yeah. And additionally, also similar to all the years past, college educated, those with higher incomes, and urbanites are more likely to read books than their counterparts. And the third study, this one is new this year, so there is no longevity study. This is a brand new study that came out. This is from Immersive Media and Books, came out in 2020. And what I liked about this is this speaks specifically to behaviors. So what are individuals' behaviors with books? And that's what you have in front of you with the infographics. So they put together a really nice infographic of a full suite of data as far as behavior with books. I also did link into the PowerPoint, which you guys will get later, the full data. So it's worth looking through. But some trends that I think matter to us here is that millennials are the most avid media users. And so again, similar to that study we just saw from Hugh, that's new for us. I think we've often been looking at our older generations or those with young kids as our primary readers, but you have to remember that millennials are people with young kids now. So I am a millennial, a lot of my friends are, and so we have to remember that they age with us and they're probably, you know, the group that is bringing in their children now to use our spaces and to read with their kids.
Is this a contradiction though? High proportion of avid book engagers are Black Latinx, but in the previous one, the ones who didn't read a book were mostly Black. Hispanic.
And that's the joy of studies. Yeah, that's why we give you a full breadth of different reports that come from different people. Because you know, they look at things in different ways. So I would definitely compare the Pew to the immersive media because they maybe use different research, but yeah, they are contradictory and I didn't do the report, so I don't know how they came that about, but it's nice to see the different options of looking at research as you go through and look at our readers.
I'm curious because in your intro here, it says engage in books, video games, movies /TV.
Mm-hmm.
So that would explain high numbers and maybe, I mean, would skew all the results if we're lumping all of those things together. It's not
Exactly.
just
This is a
reading
media
and-
report as opposed to a reading
Right.
report.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
And the last one to point out on this slide is genre is the number one way that people find books. And that's something that's important to share just because we're looking at how to organize our collections as we move into new buildings. And so I care how people look for materials and how they're finding things of interest. So thought that was worth highlighting here.
I think it's fascinating that 1 in 3 people bought a book in a bookstore that they first found in a library.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
Well, and that helps us a lot, not to go down like a whole different road, but that helps us a lot when we as an industry talk with ebook
Right.
platforms, because actually this is a perfect segue. Our collections, we spend a lot more on our digital than we do on our print because digital is super expensive.
Mhm.
And one of the arguments is that, well, you know, you buy one copy and who knows how many times people use it. And then how do you pay that author? How do you pay that publisher? But we know that there is a symbiotic relationship between purchasing of materials and borrowing them. And so that's one of the things that one of our industry is kind of trying to work towards more equity in the price of digital books, knowing that we do actually support the purchase of a book later on.
Right, that's the reason I found that statistic so interesting.
Yeah.
Isn't Wyden and
Yes.
Berkeley are
Yeah,
proposing a
our
bill
own
to-
senators, it's just great. It's nice to see that coming out of
Yeah.
Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, perfect segue. So collections per capita, the light or the blue, so the one on your left is our print per capita, and you can see our print collection per capita is small compared to our cohorts across the state. So our collection per capita is roughly 1.5 print materials per person in Deschutes County, so our service population. The unofficial, so air quotes, there's nowhere you can look this up. This is just a thing that collection development librarians talk about in conferences and in communication with each other. So the unofficial hope is that we would have between 2 and 3 books per capita or print materials per capita. So we're at least 1 item per capita below what the national standard would be. And that's because we don't have enough space. Unfortunately, print materials take up space, and we have been constrained with our buildings for quite some time. So that is not something that we've been able to grow. That of course, my team is really excited to look at changing that number as we move into our new buildings. Conversely, you can see we have a much larger collection of ebooks per capita than our cohorts, and that's for two reasons. One, because if you can't grow print, you should grow digital, and we do have some very avid users of our digital collection, so we want to help support that. But the other part is that many of our peer libraries are on Washington County cooperative system. So they have kind of a joint budget, and their per capita is reported different to the state. And the last is that they also are part of the ODLC, which I believe is the Oregon Digital Library Collective, which we opted out of several years ago because of wait times. So our collection is specific to us, as opposed to their collection is spread across many library systems. But with that comes an expenditure. So this is what I was just sharing with Anne. So our total expenditure per capita, ours is high, but that is almost exclusively due to our electronics. So ebooks, for example, are a novel idea. This is a great example. Our novel idea print book, we were able to get it in paperback. So for each copy that we got for the community was about $10 to $12, as opposed to the audio book was $100 this year. So that's how different the costs are between print and electronic, and why our spending is reflected there. This just shows in another way that print, this is our print circulation. So again, with a smaller print collection, you would anticipate smaller circulation. So there is a direct correlation between collection size and circulation. And we do see that in our annual statistics to the state. And the same reflected in electronics. So again, our much larger electronic collection, we see a much larger circulation. So it's nice to know that there is such a direct correlation. I like statistics where you can say, if we do this, then we'll probably get that. And so when our collections get to grow and be higher in that per capita, we will hopefully see a direct correlation and an increase in total circulations. But until we have that space, we tend to get very constrained with what we've got. Okay, so that's how we compare to our peers. But what did we do last year?
And what's been our hold time?
Our hold time, well,
For books compared to our other libraries?
yeah, so our hold times are much shorter than our peers. A lot of that has to do with our holds ratios. So many of our peer libraries either don't monitor their holds ratios, which I find very interesting, or they are at a higher level. So they'll be either 1 to every 7 holds or 1 to even every 10 holds. We have a 1 to 3, 1 to 4 ratio. So for every 4 holds, we order another copy. So our wait times are reflected with the number of copies we'll buy based off of holds. That to say, you cannot control patron behavior. So even though something is due, it may not be returned on time. And so it just sort of depends on when people are really truly done with that material as to when we'll get it back and get those holds fulfilled. But that's how we try and monitor those wait times.
With ebooks, there's no problem with that, right?
We do have wait times on e-materials as well. What was that?
The return of the book?
Oh, no, not with the return of the book. So it gets automatically returned, which is nice. So I talk specifically about Overdrive. So with Overdrive, when the material is due back, it gets returned and immediately offered to the next customer. We do have a holds ratio that we try and monitor with our overdrive as well. What is also nice is we have the Hoopla platform, which is immediately available. So everything on the Hoopla platform is instant access. So it's always good to double check if you have something on hold at overdrive, go check Hoopla because it might be immediately available.
They charge us differently?
They do, yeah, they're totally different lending models. So with overdrive, we have to actually buy copies of the book, just like we would be buying copies for the shelves in our branches. Whereas Hoopla is a cost per circ model. So you only paid for it when something checks out. But it depends on how popular that title is, right? So if that title's like going great guns, then you could end up paying more than you would have if you had bought a copy, but everybody got it instantly. So, you know, it's a balance.
So what I used to hear from people is, before the huge boom in population, we always have boom in population here. People would say, yeah, I actually chose to move here because I love this library, it's really great. And I moved from like Seattle, where I had to wait 3 months for a book.
Yeah.
And I get it here in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's a long time. 3 weeks, it's not a long time at all. People are so happy with the wait times that we have.
Yeah.
So it's always been in the back of my mind saying, we have these statistics, the number of books we have, material we have, the number of ebooks we have, what's costing us.
Mhm.
But what does the public feel?
You know,
I know nobody's coming to complain to me and saying like, I can't get this book except my wife, whose book club comes back and says, this is an ebook and there's like 50 holes on 10 copies.
Mhm.
I go like, they'll probably buy more.
yeah, yeah. It would be awesome if we had this like perfect outlet to get all of the feedback from our customers for all the questions that we have. We try our best with our social media and the web comments and the feedback boxes in our lobbies. We even have a collection feedback tool for staff to just funnel feedback that they hear on the desk. So we do everything we can think of to try and get that exact data back. But it does require our customers to share with us.
Right.
And what I have heard is I haven't heard anything about a concern over wait time for actually several years now. More often, actually, I put a bunch of things on hold and they all came in at the same time. And I don't know what to read now, and now I have to bring them back. So
That's one of mine.
I have that. I know maybe I giggles across the room, which is great. So I don't think wait times is a big concern, but if it ever was, I would hope that those customers would share that with us.
So have we actually had complaints from the general public about our collections and the wait times?
Not about wait times,
Quality
no.
of the books that we have?
No, I mean, we of course get, regular materials challenges, but nothing of, outside the norm. Yeah, great questions. So, kind of back on track here, highlights from 2020, 2021. So what are some changes that we made in the collection this year? The first is that we introduced a hot title DVD collection. So we had previously had just books, and that was rolled out November of 2020 and has been really well received. It's among the same popularity as our books. So that was exciting to be able to offer that to our customers. In rolling that out, we also came to realize that what was the definition of a hot title for us? And for us, the definition of a hot title was that you would walk into our branches and that hot title would be immediately available for you, that you wouldn't have to wait for it. But that sometimes one of the things that we did hear from customers was that they would get this book they were really excited about, but they were a slower reader and they weren't able to finish it in a week. And so would it be possible to change the circulation to a normal circulation, or normal for us, our standard? And so we thought, well, we could change it for the books, but I mean, really customers are going to keep the material as long as they need it. regardless of what we say, is how long they can keep it, especially now that we don't do late fees. So wouldn't it be actually better customer service to just say, everything you check out, you get for 3 weeks. What's special about hot titles is that they aren't holdable, so that when you walk into the branches, they're immediately available. And so we did change our circulation to hot titles to 3 weeks, and that was also really well received. We got a lot of positive feedback from that. Also, what was interesting, this rolled out last summer. So actually, while we were closed during the original COVID closure, we had 2 major collection changes or additions. The first is the Central Oregon collection, which is available in downtown Bend, and there's another one in Redmond. And those were specifically to highlight resources from Central Oregon. It came about because we realized we didn't want to have a reference collection anymore. And many of the reference titles, or air quotes reference, were really Central Oregon titles that we wanted to protect and highlight in some way. So really in sunsetting out a reference collection came the creation of our Central Oregon collection, which, if you think about reference and that they didn't circulate at all, this is definitely a more successful collection than what it was previously. It is niche, so it's used when it's needed, and otherwise it's just sort of a resource there. Similarly, we reclassified our law collection at the same time, so it was more topical. One of the things that we heard feedback from our customers was that we are a public library, we're not a legal law library, and that when they needed resources, they wanted to be able to say, I need to go to family law, I need to go to real estate law. Where are all these things together? And so we kind of grouped them in more common language so that the collection would be more approachable to a public library as opposed to a traditional law library. And Sharebury, we expanded. So Sharebury was traditionally just at the airport. We were actually this close to rolling something out at the hospital when COVID hit. Like literally, I think the week that we were supposed to put up our bookshelf was like early March of 2020. So unfortunately, we have not had the opportunity to expand with the hospital, but it did get us thinking, how can we get our resources back out to the community? So the Sharebury collection, as a reminder, these are books that are no longer suitable for our shelves in our branches. They have either lost interest as far as the number of copies that we bought because of holds ratios, or they became a little too used to be of mass appeal and represented on our shelves. But we realized that when somebody really needs a book, like really needs a book, and they just, a book, any book will do, please somebody have a book for me, that there was an opportunity for that in our community to give back these withdrawals. And so we have Sharebury books that go out to Hunnell Road. One of our CLs brings books out to that community. We've had books brought to Housing Works, some of our senior centers. Our CLs bring them out to the little free little libraries that you see around the community. So if you see Sharebury books, those are essentially withdrawn materials that are getting another life out in our community. And then last, we of course we removed some collections last year. It was the end of music CDs, teen audiobook, which you guys are well versed in.
I guess there's no way to tell on the Sharebury.
The only way we can tell is based off of how many boxes our community librarians are asking for. And so as they go out and they need more boxes, that's how we know they're being used. But otherwise, yeah, there's really no way to know, other than happiness. Like when Graham, he's our librarian that goes out to Hunnell Road, it's always just such relief of like, oh, thank you so much for being here, for providing this for us. So I know it's definitely been a highlight for a lot of our community librarians that get to offer that.
Does the city council know we're doing this?
I know it's been on social media, so we've definitely shared it. So hopefully they're following us. If not, if you know anyone, tell them follow Shoots Public Library. So yeah, we've mentioned it. I hope that they know. Okay, so then the last thing that we did, and I'm gonna try really hard not to get too technical on this, because I know cataloging can get a little in the weeds. But I did hear a rumor that you guys were interested in hearing a little bit about some bib enhancements that we did. So within our library catalog, we know that the Library of Congress has used traditional language in their subject headings that has not been the most socially acceptable or sensitive to the needs of our community. So we were looking at essentially the insensitive language that existed in our catalog as a result of the Library of Congress, and decided that we had some opportunity to have better reflect who we are or not.
It shuts down, give it a minute, it'll come back.
Okay. Then I'm gonna put you on that if it gets done. So we took the opportunity to relook at our language and know that our catalog is a representation of us, and we want to be as inclusive as possible. So we went through and updated subject headings, removed things that were Library of Congress subject headings in preference of what are called local subject headings. So things that we choose are the words that we want to use. And then we also went in and added additional language that we know the Library of Congress was not going to do a subject heading on, but that our community was searching on. So examples, because examples are better than anything else. So the Library of Congress subject heading for our undocumented populations was illegal aliens. To us, that is insensitive language, and we don't want that represented. So we changed that to undocumented immigrants. Language that we added, for example, for our Black, Indigenous, people of color, their acronym is BIPOC. That's not a Library of Congress subject heading, so we did choose to add that when appropriate to books and materials. Similarly, LGBTQ is not a Library of Congress subject heading. Of course, it's something that folks that want to learn more about that experience would use, so that has been added to our catalogs. There's all sorts. All in, there were 200 terms that we have either updated or added to have a more inclusive catalog, and we're building on it every day. So if that's the most nutshell I can give you without going down into the weeds of some of the search strategies that we updated over the last year.
Well, and Emily, I just wanted to say the work that you're doing through OLA on this really has impacts statewide. So I really appreciate your efforts, our efforts locally, because it's helping everybody throughout the state.
Yes.
I think it's really.
I hope so. That's my intention is, you know, we as a library profession, I think something that makes us really unique is our ability to support one another and to learn from one another and to continuously grow. And so I feel like it's part of our role in our profession to share what we know and to see how we can help other libraries do similar work if they're interested.
Yeah.
I noticed that about the time you guys shared with us that you were going to be changing it, I noticed there was a big article at the same time that came out in the ALA about it. And so I thought, you're on it.
Yeah.
I'm
So
impressed.
yeah, ALA, and this was a couple weeks ago, they announced that they finally were going to change the Library of Congress subject heading of illegal aliens, which is like, on the one hand, woohoo, yay, finally. But on the other hand, they ended up changing it to illegal immigration, which is only half the problem resolved. And so we're going to continue to use our local subject heading in preference of the changed Library of Congress subject heading. Okay, so now statistics. I thought this one was a good place to start of what was the impact on COVID to our collections. So the first kind of green square bracket is what happened when we shut down. So, you know, in between that March 10th and March 30th, you see that nice little spike. I call that the panic buying. So that was when everyone realized the libraries were going to close. And they came in and they checked out as much as they could. And then, of course, went to overdrive and, oh my gosh, can I still get stuff? What am I going to do? The libraries are going to be closed. And that plateau is because everybody we weren't here. Like nobody could return anything. Everything that they checked out in that time, they had to keep. But as soon as the library opened back up, people were done with their books. So we have this nice drop where they brought everything back, but they weren't checking anything new out. If you think back to kind of the behaviors and the thoughts of how we were feeling as a society, we didn't know if there was transmission via tactile services. The library itself was only open for curbside pickup. There was no browsing. So we're not surprised that patron behavior took a while to kind of welcome back and to come back into the library. So also the interesting thing is that with the digital, again, there was this nice spike and people, I think, had this like relief, oh, we have digital materials. But then you can see behavior just kind of slowly went back to normal. So it wasn't as though we got this incredible spike and were able to maintain it. Unfortunately, that would have been an incredible experience for us, but it really did. When the libraries opened back up, patron behavior on the digital seems to sort of return to where it was. So we get here to September, October, we're starting to see this nice upswing, people are coming back, and then we froze. And so this was again where the state mandated a freeze over last winter. So exactly this time last year when things were closed pretty significantly again. And you can see that kind of plateaued our patron checkouts. That was, we stopped seeing an increase, and really those that were using the library at that time continued to, but we have not resumed to pre-COVID conditions. So pre-COVID, our digital checkouts were usually about 30% checked out at any given time. Right now, we're about 25% of our digital collection checked out at any given time. And pre-COVID print was about 25% checked out at any given time. And now we're kind of plateaued at 22%. So hopefully we can get the word out and get people back in our buildings. Hopefully we will find a time when folks feel more comfortable browsing and staying and checking out, tactile community items, which of course is still something to consider. But this is really where we're at since COVID.
So that's percentage of the total.
Percentage checked out.
Collection.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
of digital material, 30% of all the digital materials checked out.
This is specific to Overdrive. It's hard. Unfortunately, with our digital platforms, they don't report apples to apples. So I can't show what happened with Hoopla as consistently. Plus, we don't buy Hoopla. So like if we want to compare digital to print, it makes more sense to compare to the things that we actually purchased a copy of. The other thing to be aware of, though, to your point of percent checked out, we bought so much during COVID as far as digital, knowing it was the only thing that we could provide.
Right.
So as the collection grows, the percent checked out, you're going to have a balance there. So there definitely could be an aspect of we have just as many users, but the collection grew so significantly that percent checked out is a little different.
Was there a significant change or difference in behavior between adult and children's collections?
I have one slide on age brackets and how things have been looking at the end. So we'll look at it there. Yeah.
You know, if you take away the squares, and you think of the trend over the year, it's not tremendous.
It's not tremendous.
It's
No,
pretty flat.
I
Except for the
know.
one little dip there, but
Yeah.
you could say that's an anomaly, something happened there.
Mhm.
But if we didn't know there was COVID or anything, I was looking at that data,
Yeah. I think where I don't disagree. I think I have this like grandiose personal like goal of getting our print checkouts to be like, 25, 30, maybe even one day 40% checked out. And so the fact that it's plateaued at 22 and it used to be 25, to me, it feels significant, but you're right. It's really not that significant.
We're gonna decrease the number of books and then they don't check that.
You can play the statistics
You can play
game
it,
and make
yeah.
it be what you want at any given number, just maybe,
But it's
something to
interesting.
keep in mind. So this is specific to our books. So how have our book behaviors changed? This is first circulations. So renewals are not included in this data. Nothing super significant to note. You can see 19 and 20 are nearly identical COVID years. We just looked at how behaviors were with that. And then that uptick with ebook. Again, there was a period there where that's all folks could have. So I sure hope that we would see an uptick in our ebook usage over the last couple of years.
Does that include audio?
No, this is just books. We'll look at audio next though. Thanks for the perfect segue.
I'm so excited.
Ta-da! So audiobooks, this is that significant trend that we've been seeing over the last many years now of how fast the use in audiobook as a disc format is losing traction. But exponentially so much more people are discovering the digital audiobooks. So I love that people are listening to their books. I think that's an awesome way to absorb print material and the written word. So I think it's really incredible to see how much people are discovering audiobooks just as a society. That said, disc formats are dying. Again, we let go of music CD this last year. I am getting very close to concerned about the disc book on CD circulation numbers. As you can see, I did put in the numbers on this slide because it is still 25,000 checkouts. So, I mean, that's still enough that I don't want 25,000 people mad at me. So we're gonna keep buying discs for a little while longer.
So Emily, how many people do you want there?
Well, when we got rid of Freegal, it was 400. So
Yeah. I saw online comments. So,
Yeah. That said, I do think it's something to keep in mind as we look at our buildings and we get to bring in our collections into new spaces. Maybe that's a good time to say, as we open our new branches, that we wouldn't welcome the audiobook format back. So maybe just think on that if, in the years to come, when I come to you and say, hey, it's time to get rid of them, but you got your heads up. Yeah.
I was just wondering, does it look like this in other libraries around the nation?
Yeah. I love that question because I just talked to our primary materials vendor for our disc formats, their Midwest tape. And I was talking to them yesterday, actually, which is great. And I was saying, I was just looking at our stats and our audiobooks are looking so terrible. So, we be prepared as our vendor that you're going to see less coming from us and eventually maybe nothing. And she was like, yeah, you and everyone else. So she said, especially on the West Coast, which I found interesting. I don't know if it's just the demographic of who lives on the West Coast, and there's some interesting correlation we can try and figure out, or maybe it's just because she serves the West Coast. And so maybe it's everywhere and she didn't know otherwise, but she did say, you and everyone else was an exact quote. So yeah.
My first comment to you was that they said they don't have the devices to download.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They don't want to get it.
Yeah.
They're used to this, especially the older population. So they know how to operate. And their vision is a big problem. They know
Yeah.
exactly what to push and where to insert.
Yeah. It is an important balance, and something that I know we looked at when we looked at the music CDs was, are we unequitably, hindering another population from accessing a format? And unfortunately, we have a few things that kind of play against us on that, which is when formats die, they die everywhere. That people stop making them. Players stop being produced. When they break, you can't find them. So oftentimes, a lot of our book publishers, like our Novel Idea, not available on a book on CD format. So publishers will tell us when a format is dying and we won't be able to get the content. The other part is that when formats die, eventually it does get to a point where you look at the needs of the entire community as opposed to the needs of like a small niche community. And they cost a lot of money and we want to be fiscally responsible. So kind of similar to Freegal, we could have kept Freegal, but only 400 people were using it. So at a certain point, you have to say, yes, I know I'm taking this away from some of our community members, but it's such a small group. And also I can't buy that format anymore. So we're going to have to let it go.
This may be a situation where you reach a point saying, well, the numbers are small, but they're not insignificant. Maybe we should be partnering with somebody who can store them and lend them out for us, rather than us doing it all. We have the budget for it, and the partner doesn't.
Yeah.
We buy it. They manage it.
And yeah, and again, if it were a format that was sustaining itself and we could buy, then maybe. But when you can't even get it anymore, then you're sort of stuck.
Yeah, well, they can have the old books.
Yeah, and actually, when we got rid of the
Exactly.
music CDs, we did give them back to the community. So that we did a big giveaway of all of the music CDs to anybody that was interested. So that could be an option when we let it go. So back on track again. So the physical materials collection size, nothing really to show here except that our collection size really hasn't grown in the last 5 years. And again, it's because it can't grow. And that is important to talk about, again, to the previous slide of the collections per capita. We know as a population that we're one of the fastest growing communities in the country. And with a stagnant collection size, that per capita number is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so it's something that we're looking at when we're looking at our buildings, knowing that we're already super far behind, right? We're already at 1.5 per capita when we want to have 2. And then we're building these buildings for the community size of 15 years from now. How do we make a building big enough with a collection size appropriate enough to best serve our community? And that's a big part of why we need to go down this road, is we just don't have space to serve the community at the level that we need with the collection size we should have.
I've also noticed, because I've been borrowing things for a friend who's 95. And so I'm borrowing things that I personally wouldn't be borrowing, but it has a lot of impact on the breadth of the collection too, as far as, obviously you can't keep old classics that aren't checked out very often if you need to house the books that people want. But it's interesting because when I get some of those older books, they frequently come from Jefferson County or Crook County instead. And I never really thought about it until I started seeing that pattern. So
Exactly.
it impacts what we can offer to people.
Huge, but yeah, it's extensive. What we can prioritize being on our shelves is impacted by how much shelf space we have.
Right.
E-content, on the other hand, doesn't take up any space. So our collection has grown significantly over the last 3 years. I only showed the last 3 years because it was the only data I could find. So I'm sure there's more out there, but I think this is a good representation of how fast things grew, but also, again, that percent checked out going from 30% to 25%, our collection grew significantly last year because of COVID.
And with Overdrive, we buy the ebook,
Mhm.
and we own it forever.
Oh, that's a great question. So unfortunately, every publisher has a different lending
So
model.
they still haven't resolved that.
No, so I have a graphic I can show you, but some of them are metered access. Some of them are 3-year access. Very few, I think maybe, very, very few are perpetual access anymore, which is the other part that is just such a bummer for us, is let's say we bought something that was really popular at the time and it just had continuous popularity. So this is a dated example, but it's a great one because it lasted for so long. Gone Girl was popular, so popular for like 6 years. It never stopped being on like the holds list, the hot titles, like, but we had to buy that book at that level of popularity repeatedly at that high cost because it either got over the metered access or we lost the yearly access. So it's usually like 2 or 3 years. Kind of, I'm just going to scooch past it. So we already talked about this. Our e-usage is growing. Our collection size is growing and our e-usage is growing exponentially, which is always a good sign. For circulations, this is just a percentage. So what percentage of our checkouts was digital versus physical? I think the interesting thing that I know is that digital did check out more than physical for us last year. So again, if you rewind to the very first slide and it said the ebook is still, or the print book is still superior to the ebook, again, that was purchasing behavior. And I think that's why I wanted to touch so much on what's the difference between a purchased behavior and a borrowed behavior, because borrowing behavior last year was very different. And I don't know if that'll change. I'll be really interested to see how this continues. Hopefully there's a post-COVID world that we will come into one day and see how people interact with print versus digital when it's back to a more normal life. Right now, I can say that I'm not surprised by this at all. We have a lot of folks that we're hearing they're not ready to come back into the libraries. Therefore, they're not browsing. They'd rather browse online. Therefore, we may as well just check it out online. I'm not comfortable touching things that the mass community is touching. So if you think about, our books can get really dirty. If you don't believe that, go grab a picture book off the shelf and tell me how comfortable you are with that. So I think in a COVID world, knowing that germs exist and actually sometimes seeing that in a library collection, I'm not surprised that we haven't seen a return to like a more balance on our print collection. And I'll be interested to see how this goes over the next several years.
And everything I've read so far, and this has to do with more in terms of business.
Yeah.
How businesses, other public agencies are responding to this new normal.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying it's not going to be a post-COVID world. This is the new reality. It's not a new normal. It's a new reality.
Yeah.
That people are changing the great, what do they call it? The great resignation. People have changed in their perspective of life, quality of life. That plus the electronic revolution that's already here. My granddaughter. Oh, we know all these kids. 8-year-old kid. I thought it was fantastic when my son was in high school, took his Apple computer apart.
Oh, yeah.
No, she's writing programs.
Oh, I know.
She's 8 years old.
I know.
So things have changed. Technology has brought forward the future to today. It's not going to go backwards again. All
No,
the
I don't think
businesses-
anything will go backwards. I just don't really know
It's
what
only a
the
question of
future
how
looks
much-
like. Like, I wish I had a crystal ball. Because, yeah, I do. I know, I agree, like behaviors have changed. They've changed for good. But like, what exactly has changed for good? Because I think the other part that we have seen a lot and that I think we're hearing more and more about, Zoom is a fantastic example, right? So when Zoom first came, during the pandemic, and we were all so excited. What an awesome tool. Look, we can still do our meetings and we can still connect and we can still have this. 18 months later, you please pay me extra to go to a Zoom meeting. Like, I just really don't, the Zoom fatigue is real. We're here right now in masks because we couldn't tolerate another Zoom meeting. And I think we see that behavior with our ebooks as well, as people have been on their computers all day. They're working remote all day. All of their meetings have been on Zoom, and they don't really necessarily want to read for pleasure on a digital book, but they're not ready to check out a print book yet. So that's where I'm saying, I'm interested to see where this is going to go when people feel a little bit more comfortable with whatever COVID means for us as we move on.
You know, it's interesting, right? I think that 2 years ago, the county assessor told us 50% of people moved to then telecommute. And I said, that's impossible.
Yeah.
And I asked both of my neighbors who had just moved in, both.
Oh, yeah. All of my friends
They all
telecommute.
telecommute. I mean, they're gonna be on an
Yeah.
airplane. They never go back to headquarters.
Yeah.
But I was
Yeah.
asking my one neighbor, I said, this quarantining is just terrible. I mean, people are starting to get really sick of this. He goes, I've been quarantined for 10 years. I have not gone back to my office for 10 years. I do everything from my house. I said, what do you do when you read? He goes, I buy a book from Amazon.
Mhm.
I said, why do you buy the book? He said, I'm tired of looking at the screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
said, or else I'll
Exactly.
go out there and I'll mow the lawn and I'll put on the audiobook.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
the increase of audiobooks
Yeah. Yeah.
is partly because they're multitasking,
Oh, yeah.
but they don't want to do it off of a screen.
Exactly.
And they're not going to read a book. They're going to listen to it.
Yeah.
It's not just when you travel. So I think this is the new reality of life. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't think ebooks will go down, they'll go up. But I'm wondering what devices, what is the technology going to do? I'm looking at these things and more of my friends are getting the virtual reality.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to read the book anymore. We're going to live the book.
Experience it.
Yeah. I mean,
Live.
it's really true. This is
Yeah.
starting to come around. And we have to really look at this in terms of how the library responds. We're always looking to the future. We have so many ebooks because years ago, the board decided it's not either or. We have to invest in electronic media.
Mhm.
We never saw the audio coming. Just,
It's been
I never
exciting.
saw that on the horizon.
Yeah.
But the ebooks, we said, this is going to be coming because this whole generation of kids, 18 to 20-year-olds are moving forward, just like the millennials did, and they're driving how they want to read, how they want to get information, and how they want to use their library. And if we don't go where they're going, what they're used to, we're going to be in a situation where we have to prove our relevance to the community. And so I think at this point, we have to look here and say, what is this technology telling us? Because the good thing that's come out of the pandemic is the future just got put into us today. We can't ignore it, but we're not going to go backwards. It's only a question of what more is going to be happening through technology into the future. And we have to look at that and say, how does the library respond to that now?
Yeah.
We have to have more physical books. People love books, but what's coming? The technology is changing. We're going to have whole generations, my grandkids. They like to read books, but they get almost everything off of their digital devices. They interact with their friends, playing Lego games interactively. They love to get together, but a lot of them get together and they whip out their devices and play. All right.
Yeah.
We have to take a look and say what's going on in society as a whole, and where does the library fit into this?
Well, I think that's one reason why Emily loves her job.
That's why I'm here. Yeah. So I'm showing you these stats and looking at these trends.
Yeah.
Luckily, we don't have a virtual reality ebook. It's not a thing yet. But if it comes about, I'm hoping that luckily I go to enough conferences and stay up to date and am networked that should that come about, I will be here talking to you about it. But right now we have ebooks and print books, and these are kind of the trends we're looking at, the behaviors that we are seeing so that we can be prepared for the future. And this is the slide about audiences. So I do have some data on digital use if interested. This is really specific to, again, our print. All I can say is this slide does make me sad. I feel bad for our teens. The usage of our libraries has never been super high, but it has gone down. And I think it has gone down because we also kind of back to what you were just sharing, Ray. They've told us and shown us through their behaviors, through peer libraries, through conversations with other renovations, that you can have a very successful teen collection and teen usage and teen participation in the library, but it requires them to have a space of their own and to feel like they have a place where they can go and be their unique selves and their loud selves and their, exuberant selves, and not be treated like a kid, not be treated like an adult, but a space of their own. And so we don't have that right now. And so I'm not surprised that they don't really use our spaces. We haven't made spaces that they want to use. But hopefully we will have that as we go down the road of new buildings and we can see some better growth with our teen usage. The other big thing that makes me sad about this slide, and I guess I can move this, knowing that that's probably been in the way this whole time. Our kids had a rough go with COVID. We know that, they already were impacted with their schools and their access to their school resources. Links was turned off, our lending library, while the schools were closed. And so we had a lot of parents just saying, like, we need more and more stuff for our kids, but kids like to browse. They like to see what they want to read. They don't know a title, they don't know an author. They need to be able to look around and see what sparks their interest. And we couldn't do that. We just couldn't safely allow that to happen. So now that vaccines are more available for our younger readers, hopefully we can have some better access to our juvenile collections. But yeah, it was a big hit based off of what age you fell into with COVID last year and the year before.
Perhaps, Emily, what we should be looking at outside the box here, the same thing we ran into with the Latino population. We try to bring them into our buildings and they don't come. Finally, you go where they are.
Yeah, well.
So what, has anybody thought about just saying, bringing them into the building is not important. Getting them to do more reading and interacting with literature is important. If we're going to set up a library, where do the teens go? Maybe we should have a library there. We should have something there where we can just be like the stealth bomber coming in with a book.
Yeah.
The graphic novel of Neil Gaiman, all the rest that they really love. And all of a sudden it's where they are. And they check it out, just like they would in the library, but they're not in the library.
So we have, a couple of responses to that. So there's a lot of parallels between our Latinx community and our teens, but where they're really different is that we do know that teens will use a space. Teens love having a space of their own. And our Latino and Latina populations, one of the barriers that we have is we're English based. Our signs are English. Our collection is English. All of our staff speak English. So we haven't created an environment where they can actually interact in a safe way and find what they need. But the other part is that there's often a lot of distrust with government, and they don't necessarily see us as not government. So there's a big barrier with our Latin populations to even get them to come in the door. Whereas teens, if we say like, look at all this fun seating and all these books and like programs and gizmos and gadgets, and like, they'll come and they'll stay, and there isn't that immediate barrier. And I only say that because, again, I try and stay really connected to peer libraries, inspirational libraries, networks, going to conferences. And I've seen over and over again that every library I've talked to has really struggled to get the Latin community to use their libraries, whereas there's a lot of libraries that are really successful in their teen spaces. So we can absolutely be super successful in a teen space and probably will still struggle with our Latinx community. That said, you have some great ideas. We should have teen resources going out into the library, but we haven't had a lot of opportunity to do that because we haven't been doing outreach because COVID has impacted our ability to reach our communities. For the library, Shareberry, that's all ages. So we do have teen materials that go out if we had more opportunity to do outreach, but that has also been limited for us.
Do we know where teens library is?
School, unfortunately, yeah. But no, I'm not
No, I mean,
a teen librarian, so you'd have to
there's-
check in with
yeah.
Sarah's team and see what their ideas are there.
I mean, they're.
Can I just cut in? We're going through a lot of time on this, and we've got our expert here. I'd really like to hear what she has to say, and then maybe we can discuss afterwards our thoughts on it. Just so we can get through the presentation, if that's okay with the board.
Right, that's all right.
Thank you.
And if we have further presentations on other topics that we want in the future.
Okay, thank you. So luckily, this is my last slide. So coming soon, what are we working on right now? The first is that we just released, doubled our collection size for our games. So the games collection came about because of Idea Fund, which was an idea that we had run through with our staff of getting some feedback from our staff. It ended up being successful and we decided to grow that collection. So our games collection is growing and expanding, and we've heard a lot of really good feedback from our community on that. The other expansion was Library of Things. So over the last year, we were able to roll out a Library of Things collection at all 6 branches. Prior to that, it had been just Sisters and Redmond and Lapine. So we were able to add the 3 remaining, which is Sun River, East Bend, and Bend. And overall, that has been really well received as well. One thing that we are looking at is a number of the kits that we rolled out this summer were kind of summer specific activities like gardening and floating the river. So those are not going to be checking out right now. They're obviously not going to contribute to our percent checked out very highly. So there may be a way to look at some all weather or all season collections and kits for to replace those kind of seasonal specific ones. We rolled out hotspots. So Bunny, I'll answer your question from earlier about hotspots. We did roll out hotspots here just in December. That has been really well received, I think partially because of such an awesome collaboration with our CR team and getting marketing out about that. But I was looking at our statistics this morning. There's 50 hotspots, all 50 are checked out, and there's 14 holds. So we did know when we created that collection that we maybe were creating it too small. But we wanted to test the waters and see what an appropriate collection size would be, because it is a 2-year contract on those devices. So we didn't want to overbuy and not have those being used. So we'll look at that as time goes by, and if it looks like we need to add, then we certainly can work on that.
How much does that actually cost?
For the 50 hotspots for a 2-year contract was $20,000. The last 2 things that are coming, we are going to move forward with reclassifying our DVD collection by genre. So it's something that we had been curious about for a long time. Again, we see success with genreification. We saw success with the picture books, the law library that we just talked about. And one of the things that we hear a lot is where are the foreign films? That's really where it came from, is folks wanting specifically English versus non-English speaking materials. And they were all lumped in together. So they would check out a DVD that would be non-English and be curious about that, or the vice versa. They would specifically want foreign films, and it would all just be mixed in. So we for sure know we're going to break those out. But considering the success of our picture books and again, browsing behavior, it will likely be similar to our local Blockbuster. So action, adventure, comedy, horror, that sort of thing. And in the same light, we are looking at a classification review. So running out of time and knowing that you're probably tired of listening to me talk, I am very aware of, again, the number one way that people are checking out materials and looking at materials is through browsing, and browsing is most accessible by genre. We also know from feedback from the community that Dewey is very confusing. People don't often know how to read that system or find materials. And so I am really interested in looking at how we can be the most successful library as we open the new branches and seeing if a classification, a different way of classifying our materials is the right direction as we move forward. So now I'm done. But I think we asked a lot of questions along the way. So let me see what else you might have. If you have any remaining.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm always so excited when someone in the library presents
Yeah.
something, their enthusiasm is just powerful.
Well, yeah, this is always a very interesting presentation, and this leads right into our collections development monitoring report. And there's a lot of supplementary material that's been provided as well. But Todd, do you want to give an introduction on this?
Yes, so this is one of your longest policies. So I'm not going to go through it point by point. I did in your policy, you mentioned that we will not fail to have certain policies, and that's why I've included those in here as well. So I'll see if you have any questions on any of these. I gave some analysis here, and then I'm also relying a lot on Emily's presentation as well to make sure that you're informed. Just so you know that my analysis is that we are compliant.
My only question would be, I know that you say that there have been no appeals over the past year, but I know that there are challenges that don't rise to that level. And given the trend nationally with these organized campaigns, have we been seeing an uptick in challenges, and have we felt like that's been a factor?
Yeah, so we have seen an uptick in challenges. As a side note, kind of, as you mentioned earlier, Anne, I am also the co-chair of the Oregon Intellectual Freedom Committee. So I know what we're experiencing here at Deschutes Public Library, which again is an uptick on challenges, but we are also seeing that across Oregon. And we are seeing some of these more aggressive tactics coming about from these more concerted efforts. So it is a concern. It's something that I'm aware of. It's something that I've shared with Todd for general awareness of what could happen and what is happening. And so a statement is coming out from the Oregon Intellectual Freedom Committee actually next week to address kind of our opposition to censorship efforts specific to LGBTQ and BIPOC resources, critical race theory concerns. So I'm only saying that because you'll see my name on that statement coming out. So you'll see my full opinion on it in a really much more eloquently worded than what I can share right now. But yes, challenges are happening. And we are seeing them here as well as across Oregon.
Okay, I just wondered.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Also move.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
My question is, what the hell is critical race theory?
Oh, you should go there.
I think that's the
No.
next one.
Yeah.
Google it when you get home.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Look it up on the
Yeah.
internet.
It's a straw man of
Yeah, there's a bibliography. Okay, so our last item of business is a decision on the Juneteenth holiday, consideration for 2022. So, Todd, you want to talk about this?
Yes, so a couple of things that just before the Juneteenth holiday of 2021, the state declared that that would be a state holiday, which was nice, but it wasn't a lot of time for us to react and do anything. Kind of tying that in with our efforts towards equity, diversity, and inclusion. We feel like that's a day that we should recognize as a library. It does have some financial implications, granting another holiday, as we put here. Normally, we are about to go into a negotiation process with the union, but that won't take effect until July 1st, 2022. So we still need to address this year's holiday. What happens, and then we'll be working with the board for the longer term. My recommendation is that we go ahead and approve that as, again, as an added holiday for the reasons I stated. But I wanted to make sure the board had the opportunity to weigh in.
This is for 2022.
This is, yes, it's going to be, well, depending on whatever day is the recognized holiday, because it's on a weekend this year. So it's either the 17th or the 20th. I can't remember.
Okay,
It will be the 20th.
The 20th, June.
okay. Any discussion or questions?
I thought Juneteenth was a fixed federal holiday.
It is, but when the fixed holiday falls on weekend, then the federally observed date is generally either the Friday before or the Monday after.
So we make an observed holiday.
Correct. So the actual date is June 19th.
Right.
It will be observed, which is a Sunday. It will be observed on Monday, the 20th.
I agree with you, Todd. I think it should be.
Consensus on that?
Well, how many holidays would that make it? A state holiday?
Well, 11.
That would be 11. Right. And so right now, my understanding is it is a federal holiday. We are not federal, so we don't have to. The state of Oregon made it a holiday way back, 10 years ago. They made it a.
No,
No,
they
they
just made it
last
this
year.
year, this year on about the 17th, I
Yeah.
think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's brand new to the state.
Oh, I thought it was
Last year.
No,
And the only state that doesn't recognize it is South Dakota.
it doesn't matter. We don't live in.
I know. But it says what's going on. It's interesting. Do we have to get union to agree?
Well, I think if we're gonna
Yes,
offer them
we
an
will.
additional holiday, they'll probably want.
We will have to go to them for agreement on this.
Mhm.
They have indicated that they're interested in.
I would hope so.
Okay, well, I would entertain a motion if someone would like to make one.
And this motion is just for this fiscal year.
Yeah, just for the 2022.
Oh. Just for 2022, why is that?
Because we will be going into negotiations with the union and we'll be working with the board on what that looks like for holidays in that collective bargaining contract.
Because this happens before.
Right, okay.
I make a motion that we accept this Juneteenth 2022.
Make it a paid.
Make it a paid holiday.
employee.
And then a library holiday.
Okay,
So the library would close on that day.
Yes.
okay, we have a second?
Yes.
Ann? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Go. Todd.
Pass this down. Just want to, we got recognition from the Deschutes National Forest for our working with them on the Cascade Wilderness Permit.
That's cool.
So very nice. Big thanks to Holly and Lynn and all the staff that helped make this possible. It's a great partnership for us and the Forest Service. So I just wanted to let you know that we got that recognition.
That's great.
And then I will, I think, stop at my updates there because we've given you so many updates in this meeting. So,
Lots of updates.
yeah.
Okay, well, I have a few updates. So we had our unveiled event for Novel Idea on Sunday. It was great. Todd was in a tux. It was visually stunning, and the community relations staff did just a great job of making it fun and exciting, and even though it was a virtual event, but it's been viewed by more than 200 people. And that number is climbing. So the novel idea for next year is the Seat Keeper. I printed out the wrong page. Yeah, the Seat Keeper. And we also selected a youth book, I Can Make This Promise, and I think it is going to be an exciting opportunity to discuss a lot of locally of topics that have a lot of local interest, and so I think it's going to be it's really good selection. And then we also unveiled our author lineup for next year. We'll have Tommy Orange on February 3rd, Amy Tan on January 13th, and Neil Gaiman on March 6th. And those are three outstanding award-winning novelists, and they're going to be doing virtual presentations. We've already raised $26,000 in sponsorship in a 6-week period to support this program. The foundation has just been doing a fantastic job, and we've got $20,000 in additional in-kind sponsorship. So we're off to a really great start. The foundation is has been doing great work over this. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting lineup. So that's my foundation news. And now we're on to self-review of the meeting. Shall we start at the end, Anne?
Sure, another good meeting. Really appreciate all the reports that we get from staff and from Greg. It's really helpful to have that verbal presentation. You're looking at this, the board packet, it's pretty overwhelming, just so to have your input really helps explain all that and make sense of the information. So thank you, appreciate that.
She said it all. I appreciate all your input and your enthusiasm about the library, your obvious love for what you do. And Greg, you always accommodate what we're looking for, so that's great. But good meeting.
Robert, nice work presentation. Know your stuff. That's great. And Emily always knows her stuff. That's why I ask her all these hard questions. She knows them.
I'm gonna answer them. That's why Todd has to be like, stop answering them.
That's well. That's good to hear. Greg, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the reports you give us.
Same for me, whatever you said. Your reports are always great. Really appreciate the time you put into it to give us this information. So thank you.
Yeah, I ditto. It's a very informative meeting, and I think collection development is always such a provocative topic because that's kind of our core service to people, and so I think it's really good to know that we're keeping on top of trends and that we're always thinking forward on all those things. And Greg, again, thank you for the detail, the explanations, clear explanations, and all the great job. It's super neat. Todd?
I'll echo everything said. I was very informative. I'm glad you get a chance to see what I experience on a daily basis. If you wonder how I do my job, I don't. There you go.
I want to know who made these little things.
Yes.
Yes, and thank you, Lori. Lori takes such good care of us. We missed being with you. Yeah, and I'd like to encourage everybody to respond when Lori and Todd reach out with alternative
Yeah,
dates.
I might just ask if you could let Lori know what days you're not available. It might be easier, just because we're trying to coordinate a lot of people with the architects, and they're busy, so just trying to find that one perfect date and get all 5 of you there. I really want you to have a chance to see those designs early. I don't want to have to wait a month to show them to you. So anytime after January 12th. Basically, we'd love to do it in January. So any date from January 13th on, if you're not available, let Lori know, and then we could schedule from that.
And thank you, Lord, for all your patience. That's what it is to go.
Yeah.
I thought it was a long shot to try to pick one date and stick it in front of you, but it was worth a try. So,
Well, you never know. I
Yeah.
mean, it's 6 weeks out or whatever, so my dance card is pretty darn empty. So, with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year.